All right, good evening. Um, it has taken a little bit for me to figure out how to stream on not my phone. And hopefully I am doing it right. Honestly, I'm a little bit paranoid. Like I got oh, I gotta check the app. Yeah, no, seems like it's going. Right, this is awesome. Okay. Good evening. My name is Rachel Hansen. Uh, I'm really excited to have you here in the week 3 module, Unpacking Privilege. Now, before we really get rolling, a few ground rules and housekeeping to really, uh, wow, I am not myself tonight. But yeah, like some ground rules and housekeeping just to kind of ground us in like the space that we are in right now. Um, if you are here, welcome. I am really glad to have you. If you are here and the only comment that you really want to make is to comment on my appearance, um, none of that, right? I'm not here for that. Nobody else is here for that. Just keep those comments to yourself. Now, a lot of what we're going to be talking about this evening, right, it's kind of a heavy lift academically. So please feel free to ask questions, and engage in conversation. This is a little bit trippy, but I do have um, the Substack app up. So right as you have questions, that's how I'm going to see them. But yeah, let's get rolling here. Um, got my elderberry lemon balm tonight. It's good stuff. Now you might be really wondering, why are we talking about privilege in like a feminist studies class? And really, why would we not be talking about privilege in a feminist studies class, right? Like, feminism really is about how we're showing up and how we're using that privilege or not in the world that we live in. Now, our first kind of piece of content this evening is actually, I might be dating myself a little bit by calling it a throwback, but um, one of my absolute favorite web series um, was kind of in the mid 20 teens. Uh, MTV Decoded is what I knew it as, right, as a young adult. Now it's MTV Impact. And Francesca Ramsey did an episode called "Why Does Privilege Make People So Angry?" Now, uh, that episode is linked. You can watch it for free on YouTube. I would very strongly recommend that you do so. Um, but she does a really good job, I think, of laying out why privilege makes us so uncomfortable. Um, Now, what Francesca Ramsey says in the video is that privilege can feel really uncomfortable for a few reasons. It can be feel like you are being blamed for something that's not your fault. And I think that particularly for when we're talking about racial privilege, white people really do feel this way, right? Um, and that's crummy, right? It's crummy to feel like you're being blamed for something that you didn't do. Um, but at the same time, it can also make you feel like you have something that you don't deserve, which can lead to guilt. Now, I think one thing that I hope that you would take away, or have taken away, I should say, in the last few weeks, is that feminism really is about introspection. So if you're not taking the time to examine why you are feeling a feeling, it's really going to lash out in a way that's not going to make any sense. Or, at best. And at worst is going to be harmful. So if you feel like you have something that you don't deserve, it really can lead to guilt. And guilt, when unexamined, can lead to anger as a defense mechanism. Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to defend yourself, right? Um, but again, with that introspection, we're really trying to get into uh, why are you feeling this feeling? And why is it maybe causing you to behave in a way that I was going to say a way that you wouldn't normally, but I think I'm kind of midstream revising that thought to say that's going to make you behave in a way that doesn't line up with the person that you want to show up as in the world. Um, and then kind of that last piece that Ramsey talks about is um, that sometimes people really just don't understand how privilege works in the world that we live in. Uh, and if you are feeling confused, and again, not engaging in that self examination, it can be hard to sit with that confusion when all of your other emotions are already really high, right? Um, so, really talking about how privilege works, a lot of us assume that privilege works in a way where if you have it, things are really easy for you. And so, if you are, if you're here living in the United States, or really kind of anywhere in the global north, and you are either um, a man or a white person, you especially have a lot of privilege. Um, and really, what that means is that your hard work is going to get you all of the rights and responsibilities that come in the society that we live in, right? If you work really hard, it's a lot more likely that you are going to do well. But we all know that that's not the whole story, right? Um, and there are other forms of privilege out there, right? Like there's class privilege, or we could call it socioeconomic privilege, which also means that uh, your material well-being, right, and like your financial security, is another form of privilege. Now, the example that I'm going to choose to use here, after I have a little more tea, I can tell that it's getting to be autumn because my mouth gets dried out a lot more quickly. Um, so when I was a brand new parent, right, and this has been almost 11 years ago, a little over 11 years ago now, uh, my spouse and I were both working full time. Uh, on my family tradition to that point was moms who stay at home with their kids, which is a fantastic choice if you have the security to make. We did not. And I was having a really difficult time. And so at the time, and again, this is about 2014, I was doing so much searching online because I've had this job for a while, so I think it's okay to say this on the internet. My job was not particularly demanding. I could finish all the work that I needed to do in a day pretty quickly, and then I kind of would just futz around on the internet. But most of what I was doing was trying to find something, anything really like out there in the world that um would allow me to be economically secure while also um, basically effectively managing my life as a new parent, which if you are a parent, is really exhausting and overwhelming. And kind of the thing at the time. that I was seeing online anyway were a lot of people in my like mid-20s demographic who were talking about how their jobs didn't bring them joy, and so they were just quitting their jobs and traveling the world. And that's a type of privilege, right? Um, if you are a young adult who can say, I hate this job, I don't want to do it, I'm just going to go travel the world and it's going to be awesome. Yeah, maybe it is going to be awesome. But if you can't pay your bills of your own volition, um, who's picking up that slack for you? Some of us don't have people in our lives who can do that. So right, like there's also class privilege here. Uh, but right, kind of all of these things work together, uh, so that right, in some ways things might be easier for you, just because of the way that society is built. Um, and so if you're feeling guilty about that, rather than getting angry, right, and using that anger in a destructive way, I would suggest to you that you consider getting curious instead. Um, and that curiosity is really what is going to drive you to build a better world. Um, now, Chris Ramsey breaks down those 4 points really well, and hopefully I did okay expanding on them today. Um, when it comes to privilege, though, I would jokingly add an additional reason why privilege might make you feel a little uncomfortable, and that is spelling it. I always want to add a D at the end of privilege. Don't know why, but there we go. And that can make you feel uncomfortable too. Especially if you're somebody who thinks of yourself perhaps as relatively smart. Um, and this is a word that you consistently misspell. Well, that kind of stinks. So, um, now, not that long after Francesca Ramsey kind of breaks down why privilege makes us feel so uncomfortable, um, there's another person who is very publicly um, unpacking the discomfort that comes around privilege, and acknowledging privilege. And that person is John Biewen. Um, now, Biewen has a podcast uh, called Scene on Radio. And scene is spelled SCENE. So not scene, but the scene, like a movie scene. Um, and in season 2, episode 1 of Scene on Radio, he opened by reflecting on a conversation that he heard in 2016 between comedian D.L. Hewley, um, talking about the surprising to them rise of Donald Trump. Uh, Now, when Hewley was asked if he was shocked by Trump's success, his reply was, and I quote, I'm not shocked that he is, because I think that ultimately America is aspirational. Like, to me, Obama is what we would like to be. Donald Trump and his supporters are what we are. Now, if I was the person that was producing that podcast, I would have dropped in a record scratch sound effect there. Um, because just as Buin was surprised to hear this in 2016, when I was listening to it in preparation for this module in 2025, it felt just as much like a gut punch. Right? It was not good. And it really gave me a minute to sit and think, which ultimately is what feminism is about, right? It's about trying to build that space for yourself to sit and think, and really reflect on why you're having those feelings. Uh, Now, across season two of Seen on Radio, the other thing that I think Buen does a really good job of is really breaking things down, to address some of the common talking points that we discuss when we're talking about privilege. Um, right, because if you're just sitting there, you're going, no, 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 no. Privilege isn't real. Like, everybody is rewarded according to the effort that they put in. Um, right, like we can see that that is not true. Like just through our halfway working brains and basic observational skills. Excuse me. Um, and also, um, I hope you'll forgive me. I had got some notes and I just totally lost my train of thought here. Um, it's gonna happen in a live from time to time, isn't it? So within season two of Seen on Radio, um, and this um, the title of this season is Seeing White. Right? They're really talking a lot about racial privilege, which I think is part of intersectional feminism, which we talked about last week. Um, it's really about power, right? Privilege and power, to my mind, and I hope to yours too, are synonymous with each other. Excuse me. Um, and one thing that Buin really talks about when we're talking about power and whiteness, um, is talking about biology. Because, right, inevitably somebody is going to bring up that we're all just human beings and that there's no real basis for a racial hierarchy. Um, and on one level, that is absolutely true. There's no real reason for a racial hierarchy. Um, but that doesn't mean that it's not real, right? Um, just because there's not a good reason for something happening doesn't mean that the thing that's happening is fake. Uh, We absolutely feel the impacts of both a racial and a gender and a socioeconomic hierarchy in the society that we live in. My apologies. Um, and according to Buin and his guests, and this is a thought that I subscribe to as well, um, this power and privilege dynamic, um, really exists to uphold something else, and that something else is capitalism. We'll be talking about that more in a few weeks here. Um, but suffice it to say, right now, some of the most important behind the scenes work within the feminist movement, um, and I would say really over like the past 50 years or so, um, has been the creation of a new international economic order. Now, this really came to a head during the UN Decade for Women, from 1975 to 1985. Um, and within this system, right, seeing whiteness, especially, but obviously also, um, gender as a privilege marker and socioeconomic status as a privilege marker. Uh, Seeing those things means learning to recognize a global system that disproportionately disadvantages people in the global south. Uh, and so, as we are talking about feminism and power and privilege, seeing those things and recognizing that we, in fact, do have the power to be aspirational, um, And now, if you are watching this and you're choosing to engage in this content, I'm assuming that you, perhaps like me, are also a left-leaning person. Um, but feminism is absolutely for everybody. And with that, I'm going to acknowledge that the next thing I say is going to be potentially a little bit controversial. Um, but going back to a couple of minutes ago when I was quoting Hewley, uh, yeah, names really do leave me sometimes. But when I was quoting Hewley, and he had talked about um, Obama, Barack Obama, and his family being aspirational. Um, I'm not necessarily saying that with regard to his politics, right? Now he did a lot of things that I really liked when he was president, along with um, the Congress and the Supreme Court. But when I think about the Obamas as being aspirational, I really am thinking about their family dynamic. Um, right? Like we would all assume, based on what we have seen, uh, that they have a strong marriage, that their kids really like them, uh, and that Barack and Michelle both have strong professional lives and strong identities outside of their relationship with each other. So when I think of them as aspirational, that's what I mean. And so as we're talking about power and privilege, we also need to realize that we can identify the aspirational, really wherever it is, right? Like I'm just using that as an example because it's the example that I wrote about in this module. But you could pick anybody that you view as aspirational and who is really working in a way to improve our common humanity. Pick them and make that the decision of how you're going to follow and not um, maybe the person who is the president in the United States right now, who I would definitely not describe how he's conducted himself as aspirational. Um, but building that aspiration then does usher in a new economic order that really improves things for all of us. Um, Now, with all of this, you might be going, okay, so this sounds pretty good. Like maybe at least a little bit I'm following what you're saying. I know I've been a little bit more rambly today than I normally am. Um, but what does that actually mean for me in my regular everyday life? Um, and that kind of ties into what I've been talking about, like that introspective component of how privilege shows up in our lives. Now, one way that's really powerful for us to do this, especially if you are kind of new to this type of work, is to go through Peggy McIntosh's essay, White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. Um, Now, this knapsack is, to me at least, relatively recent. McIntosh wrote this essay in 1988, so me and the essay are the same age. Um, but this essay is really more of a list of everyday, quote unquote, invisible privileges. Um, and she started out first privileges that she held as a white person in the United States, and it has since been expanded out. Um, and this list includes things like I can, if I wish, arranged to be in the company of people my own race most of the time. Or, um, and this is an example I picked specifically for this class, I can easily find academic courses and institutions which give attention only to people of my race. Now, the knapsack metaphor really is helpful. And it helps us think about the unearned tools and resources that we carry. And that sometimes we carry, sometimes maybe even often, that we carry unknowingly, right? Um, Now, the thing I want to really tie this into um, another kind of tool within the feminist toolkit, and that is the power and control wheel that was is based in the Duluth model out of Duluth, Minnesota. Um, this tool, the power and control wheel, really shows how these concepts can play out in interpersonal relationships, and then also how you can kind of build those out um, into larger social groupings. Um, and that wheel can really help us identify dynamics within ourselves and others. Um, Initially, the power and control wheel uh, is a tool that's used to understand the pattern of behaviors in abusive relationships, right? This came out of a home for battered women, which at the time it was developed was the correct terminology, which is why I'm choosing to use that terminology now. Um, but as I said, this is a wheel that also builds out um, kind of larger systems of abuse. Um, Forgive me, I'm just looking over at the wheel and I've got the dual monitors. It gives kind of a squirrel view. Um, but within that power and control wheel, of course, there's the things that we would normally think of as um, abusive behavior in interpersonal relationships. Um, and I'm talking about things like threats and coercion, intimidation, um, emotional abuse, uh, isolation. But within the society that we live in, and germane to this module, using your privilege in a relationship. And examples of that include people who treat you as insignificant or like a servant, making decisions without you, believing that they are always right or superior, or using their status to control. And their status could include things like race, age, religion, citizenship. That one I think is particularly topical to the times that we are living in. Your sexual or gender orientation, or your ability, right? Or I would say maybe if you're new to using the term ability in this way, you could also think of it as disability, um, or using stereotypes against you. And I think that we've all seen plenty of that, right? In the times that we are living in. Excuse me. I'm just now realizing I'm coming to the end of my notes here. It's 30 minutes in. Um, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, excuse me. Um, but I think, right, like as we're sitting here and we're talking about privilege and how it shows up in our lives. Some of your big takeaways that I would really like for you to take away from this talk this evening is understanding that you have a lot of control. And I think that that is really valuable to remember when we are living in a time when control can really feel like it's fleeting. And you have control over how you're showing up in the world. You have control over your emotions and how you choose to channel them. Um, and again, like as an example of that, if you are feeling guilty and then angry as a result, rather than engaging in destructive anger, um, try to route it into an area that is more curiosity and constructive anger to build a world that we are more interested in all living in. And also to remember that as you are looking for examples of maybe aspirational things that you, not things, forgive me, um, people that you find to be aspirational, um, right? Thinking about how you would conduct yourself in a way that is maybe similar to them, right? Kind of in a fake it till you make it sort of a scenario. Uh, right? Because if you can use your privilege to really like question how things are around you, you then do have the ability to move forward productively and to use your privilege for good. Um, I'm having a little more tea and I have a couple, like just little announcements to close this out, I think, for this evening. Excuse me. Yeah, so I guess as we're closing out here, I really hope that you will take some time, if you can, to sit and think about how power and privilege impact you in your regular everyday lives. Um, and then be a little more boring, but um, I did want to draw attention to kind of a new spot on the Rachel Teaches Gender website. And that is the About section. It has a little bit more about what you can expect for the next few semesters here in a row, and also different ways that you can support this work. Um, so until next time, I hope that you will stay curious and continue to build your feminist identity. And I will see you next week.